And unlike our Hollywood, depiction of this, where it's like, you're gonna do it, and he says, no, I don't want to do it, and then finally God talks to him harshly, and he's like, all right, I'll do it. And that's not what happens in the biblical text, right? In the biblical text, he's just like, no, you cannot send me. Do not send me. Do not put me in this situation. I can't deal with it. And it's actually kind of frustrating because you're like, dude, just do it. Like, just go and do it. And yet God's like, okay, I have to make a different arrangement. We'll get Aaron to do this. We'll get Aaron to speak for you. You'll be like God to him, and he'll be like you to Pharaoh, and we'll make it work. And so God has to make this completely different way in which he can put Moses to work the way he's supposed to. Okay, so Moses deals with a low view of self. Let's look at that characteristic. What does that actually mean, that he has a low view of self? Well, there's some characteristics of that. So his self-perception is he has this low self-esteem. He has a very critical view of self. Do we know people like this? Right? No, I can't do it. No, I'm not good enough. No, I'm not. And maybe we know people like that. We constantly have to be like, no, you're fine, you're good. And we have to kind of keep talking them up. And all the while they're still like, no, I'm terrible. I'm a horrible person. And so with low perception, that's a constant grind in their mind, as I'm just constantly fighting this internal battle of whether I'm good enough or I'm not good enough, or having to face all the criticisms. I did that thing. It's all because of how bad I am. If I fail, it's because I'm so terrible. There's the emotional pattern of this is excessive guilt. All right, this is I have super guilt over anything I do, any little failure, any little mess up, and it does not have to be sin even. Oh, I messed up when I said your name. I'm so sorry. I'm such a terrible person. Or, oh, you told me your name 5 minutes ago. I forgot it. So terrible. I'm an awful person. And it weighs on them as if they had murdered someone. I mean, that's where we're getting the intensity, the level of guilt. There is a fear of rejection. All right. There is this constant, this fear of rejection that says, okay, anybody I meet, any person, if they reject me in any way, shape, or form, I am dead. I'm done. I'm out of it. I mean, I cannot handle it. I cannot take it if I'm going to be rejected. There's sensitivity to criticism. Talked a little bit about that yesterday, right? Sensitivity to criticism. It says, man, if you say anything bad about me, oh, you got a little ketchup stain on your shirt. Oh, man, what a terrible world I live in. What an awful person I am. I got ketchup on my shirt. And again, that leads to chronic insecurity. When we see that in their behavior, okay, so we take these thoughts, these internal thoughts and how they go, and we see this in their behavior and how they act because they feel this way. There is chronic procrastination, right? There's just this, I will not do tasks. I avoid them. If I don't have to do it, then I can't fail at it, then I don't have to deal with the consequences of failure. It's easier to avoid those tasks than it is to face the challenge of those tasks. It's easier than actually facing up to it, because if I don't do it, then I don't fail, and that's easier to handle. Okay, or it goes into this perfectionism. I'm going to work at it I'm going to work at it. If it's not perfect, I mean, we've all worked with that person. The project's not perfect. We got to start over. It's like, it's good enough for now, right? It's good enough for, it's a much better, much harder for them to finish a project and put their seal of approval on it if it's not absolutely 100% perfect. Then here's the thing. Then when they accomplish something, so if they do something good, no, it's not that great. Yeah, it's not that good. No, it was all right, And I mean, they could win the World Series. They could win the home run grand slam that wins everything. It wasn't anything. That was no big deal. There's that inability to capture their success in that way. Now, with this, there's some cognitive patterns that come to this. So because of the way they think, because of the way they are acting in that negative self-talk is just hard to shut off. It's hard to shut that off. I mean, it is. It's really hard to just, you can lay awake at night and it's just, try as you might to shut that voice down that tells you how terrible you are and keeps bringing up all of those things, all of those reasons why you're such an awful person. I mean, you can't shut it off without medication. I mean, and we're going to get to addictions in a second, but you can't shut it off, right? Unless you find some way in which you can just shut it down. And that's why people turn to that kind of stuff. Okay? And then there's also just the notion that before they meet you, before they interact with you, before they even fail you, they already assume you've judged them in the harshest of ways. That you know their deepest, darkest secrets in somehow, shape, or form. You already know it. You've already judged me, and it's no use trying to change your mind. All right? And so that's kind of the nature of how a person who's dealing with a low sense of self acts. Those are the traits that exist and they have to function with, okay? And so, you kind of get in the process in the mind of it, you kind of think, well, yeah, how do you get out of bed in the morning? How do you actually do this? And we wonder, and that's the problem. All right, that is, and the last thing, though, that is important, and it's insanely important for us to understand, not only for our fellow human being, but for those of us who are trying to teach Christ, who are trying to reach out and change someone's mind to this, is that you have to understand that there is a drive for them to essentially cope and soothe this whole thing, all right? And if they cope and soothe this, they will do things because of their uncertainty about their personal values, okay? So there's this idea that if I feel this way because of all the things that I believe, right, all the things I think about myself, and I say I believe in Christ, right? Well, am I sure about that? Because it's not leading me to anything good, right? It's leading me to all this judgment and criticism, and there's just a lot of uncertainty to what they think, feel, believe about things. And in order for them to soothe this, they will adopt the views and opinions and beliefs of other people just to get acceptance, okay? So if I'm in a group of Mormons, and I'm not Mormon, but I have all these things going on. It's just easier to just say, yeah, the Book of Mormon is a great thing, right? In order for me to just gain acceptance. And if anything, I can be invisible, okay? If anything, I can be allowed in the circle and be invisible, and I have a safe place where I can just relax for a minute, all right? They define themselves by their roles and achievements, okay? So let's say, again, there's that idea they can't accept the accomplishment. They can't accept, praise for their accomplishment. Well, at the same time, accomplishments are kind of a safe place. I at least know I did this. Like this one thing that I did 20 years ago defines who I am for the rest of my life because I at least know that thing was good. Right, or I'm in this one role. You guys, I was picked for this role. I was allowed to be in this role, and because I'm in this role and keep it, I must be okay enough. I must be acceptable, and now I define myself by said role. Okay, so this leads us to our mental health disorders that kind of are born out of this whole thinking. So there is major depressive disorder. So I mean, you remember I had the DSM yesterday. This is these mental health disorders. Major depressive disorder is a persistent self-criticism and feelings of worthlessness and shame and hopelessness. When we get to a depressive disorder, that takes shape in things like, hey, I can't get out of bed in the morning. Right, I can't do simple things. I can't do things I even used to enjoy. Okay, I mean, anybody here know someone? You don't have to raise your hands, but anybody know someone that has dealt with that? It's kind of hard. You're like, man, just get up in the morning, right? Just do it. And it's like, but there's just this blanket on them that they can't. Mm-hmm. All right, and there is a reality. So as much as I kind of torched the DSM yesterday and said I don't really agree with a lot of that, there is a reality to that disorder that does exist on the extreme levels. In school, one of the things I taught that just like caught me and said, okay, I believe this exists on some levels. There was a woman that they were showing her treatment, and she was talking about how, I am the worst person ever. Satan is doing things to torment me, to punish me for all the evil things I did. She just was in this whole scape of I am terrible, I am horrible. And the way they fixed it was they gave her electric shock treatment. They brought her in, gave her electric shock, and it was insane, the immediacy of the treatment, where she's like, man, I mean, life is bright. Like, I have good, I can't help but think good things about myself. I mean, just the ways in which like that does persist, and when it's out of control, that's where we get to these major issues. Someone who had this that we could probably look from a biblical perspective is Elijah, right? Elijah is, chapter 18 of Kings, right? Famous Mount Carmel scene, victory, all that, right? What happens in chapter 19? I just want to die. I just wanted, Lord, just let me die. I'm all by myself. Like Elijah suffered and struggled with that for sure. We have anxiety disorder. So anxiety, generalized anxiety or social anxiety, is this idea that you're afraid, you're fear of embarrassment, right? I don't want to get into a situation where I'm gonna have to perform, or I'm gonna have to meet new people because then I'm gonna make a mistake, and I can't handle that. There's a constant second guessing, constant dealing with this, and others are more competent than me, right? You look around and you look at all the people, and it's like, you could probably do this better than I could. Why don't you get up here and start speaking or whatever? There's just that kind of that anxiety about comparison and where other people are. King Saul probably dealt with this. If you look at 1 Samuel 18, 7-8, it says, and the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? Right now Saul, of course, is saying all this with the knowledge that David's supposed to take the kingdom from him. But still, there's just that idea, right? Like, man, everyone thinks he's better. Oh, man, everyone thinks he's so much better than I am. Why not just give him the kingdom too? And so he had a lot of anxiety with that. Obviously led him to a lot of trouble. Moses is clearly dealing with this back at the burning bush sequence. And with this is important to note, because these two, right, depression, anxiety, these are the two major ones. Right? If you remember the statistics from yesterday, these are the two main issues of our mental health crisis that's in our country today, in our state. All this is depression, anxiety. That is across the board. Here's the thing about depression and anxiety: they are extremely normal parts of life. Okay, at some point in life, if you haven't been already, you will feel depressed. And if you haven't felt it already, you will feel anxiety throughout your life. And so when we're talking about depression disorders and anxiety disorders, I am of the firm belief it's because you have let anxiety or depression get so out of control that we have left ourselves in a place where now we have to take some serious measures to take care of this. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more as we talk about that. But here's some other things, right? Some other things that go on with this is there's trauma. Right? How many trauma? That's a buzzword these days, right? Everyone knows about trauma. Oh, this thing traumatized me. Oh, I've got this trauma. I've got something going on. But that's born into things like PTSD or complex PTSD. Anybody know PTSD? What does that mean? What does that stand for?
Traumatic stress disorder.
Does anybody know how you get PTSD?
Going through a traumatic event.
Traumatic event. Does anybody know the definition of a traumatic event by PTSD standards? Combat, where your life is threatened.
Right.
Okay? Where you actually felt a real sense of life is threatened. Your life is probably not threatened if you get an F on your report card. Okay? I'm sorry. It's horrible. It's awful, but it's just not the same kind of trauma that PTSD is talking about. Okay? And hard as that may be, we again, using PTSD has become this this buzzword of I got PTSD. It's like we've got to be able to at least put that on the spectrum and understand where we stand with our traumas. Okay? I'm not saying that getting an F on a report card isn't hard. Okay, I did it too. I got a lot of those. But anyway, okay. But again, we've got to put it into perspective of what trauma really is, and that is the thing when we talk about trauma. All right, is that there are things that affect you differently than others. All right, somebody can have a severe impact where hey, I feel like my life was threatened. and they can walk away from that just fine, right? They can walk away from that. Doesn't mean they're not hurting, doesn't mean they're not having problems, but they can walk away from that and they can function. And the same thing happens to somebody else, and man, it just obliterates them. And it's just, there's just a whole host of what your trauma is for you isn't for somebody else, and what that all looks like. And so it's hard, but it's all about how you've internalized the message. Okay, we've seen this in Scripture. People who have traumatic events, right? Traumatic things happen to them where life was on the line, and or even not even maybe life, but life is ruined. Okay, look at Job, right? Job did not have an immediate threat of his life, and yet his life was ruined in a way that was very traumatic for him. Okay, he came through that okay. All right, maybe not whole, right? Maybe broken and then made whole again. You can make all those arguments for it. But did he go through trauma? Yes, and it all goes back to how did he internalize that message? How did he speak to that issue? All right. If it looks, and then so with that, it affects you when you talk about PTSD. It affects the way in which you deal with people from there on. Okay, it's going to affect the way you set boundaries with people. It's going to affect the way that you trust your own instincts on things. Right? If you're in a situation that's similar to what happened before, you're now going to react very differently. Right? If I'm walking down a dark alley where I was mugged last week, I'm probably going to react differently to being in a dark alley than I did a week ago. Okay, and that's normal in some ways, but it can get out of hand, and that's the thing we've got to think about. And then the other part of that is it's going to be hard to regulate your emotions when something like that happens. It's going to be very hard for you to handle because there's going to be a flood of them, and it's like, man, how do I handle the floodgate here? Okay, and so with that all leads to, because it goes into this instinct of survival, right? It's because, hey, all these things are happening in the ways that I am treating and handling these things because we're talking about life or death. Okay, that's why an F on a report card is not the same as getting mugged and stabbed or something, or getting shot. It's a very different experience, and it's because now we're looking at what is survival here. What does it actually look like to save my life versus not? We think about, now think about addictions, right? So I told you we can talk more about addictions. Substance use disorders, again, is a huge one as far as what we're dealing with. And it is because of their inability to handle these things, such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, all those kinds of things. Addictions are born out of, hey, I don't know how to deal with this, and this helps me deal with this. And it's a way of escaping it. Mm-hmm. And that's really the reality. It's an escape. It is not a coping mechanism, right? People will say, it's my coping mechanism. It's just the way I handle it. It is not coping. It is escape. It is, I don't want to deal with this. I never want to deal with this. So we're going to find every way possible that I don't have to keep going and dealing with it. It's escaping that self-hatred. It's escaping the numbness. It's escaping the reliving of the experience. And there's it gives you maybe a temporary boost of confidence, but really in the end, it's not going to help you. It's not going to stop the things. The prodigal son, right? You might make the argument that he was an addict, right? Luke 15:13. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. I'm pretty sure there was some substance abuse in there, okay? Whatever that looked like, whether it was just drinking, whether there's something else that was going on in there, I'm pretty sure reckless living involved that. And you can say, we can say all manner of what he was going through, what he was trying to escape or whatever. But it just kind of shows the lifestyle of someone who's just trying to get away from what my life is, right? For whatever reason, I don't want to live on a farm with my father. I want to go off and do whatever it is. I'm trying to escape responsibility. I'm trying to escape whatever my life is and just live free to be, right? This is where we get also things like eating disorders, right? Bulimia, anorexia, all of those. Those are all issues of, again, low view of self. I'm fat. I have to do something to stop being fat. I have to do something to change my image. I'm afraid of I may not be fat now, but I'm afraid of getting there. And so now I have to do things to stop that. Okay. And it's back to that fear. I don't want my body to look like something that I don't like, that says something about me that I don't like. I will take the drastic steps in order to get there. it's also born out of, and a lot of it is born out of a misperceived conception of self. Okay, you got thin people who are like, I'm fat, and it's like, well, no, you're actually, if anything, you're malnourished. It's like there's that reality that gets lost in trying to stop this low view of self, trying to silence those voices. Right, we're putting off reality because the voices that are telling me how terrible I am are so loud. I've got to do drastic things, and I've got to shut out reality. And so we don't have a biblical example to this, but again, you can see how it's all centered around this view of self leads to very harmful things in a lot of different avenues. Right, there's a lot of different branches on how this view of self can really be harmful and lead to harmful behaviors. And surprisingly, you might not know this, but surprisingly, narcissism is born out of a low view of self as well. I think I told you that yesterday. We're going to talk about it more today. Narcissism can be, hey, I'm awesome, and everyone needs to think I'm awesome. But narcissism can actually be born out of, I'm terrible, and I only want to hear how awesome I am. And anything that pops the bubble of what I know about myself that's awful is not acceptable. And I will do anything. I will get violent. I will do whatever I need to do in order to shut down this view that I'm not great. And I will only create this bubble, this world that tells me how awesome I am. It's like the shame is subverted by a feeling of superiority, right? Like I'm ashamed of myself, but I'm going to put on airs that I'm superior over all the people around me, so that no one will know how awful I really am. Haman is an excellent example of this, isn't it? Okay, Haman is perfect because anytime anyone tries to show him how not great he is, man, it bums him out, doesn't it? It just sends him in a spiral. I mean, he literally has to honor Mordecai. He's like, well, now I got to kill the dude. Okay, all right. He tells me how terrible I am. Well, the only way to fix this is to kill him, and everybody who's like him, right? Everybody. And so, yeah, Haman is a perfect example of that. So, all right. So with that, okay, again, we talked about this, right? That's the mental health disorders. That's where it's like wildly out of control. But now we've got to talk about, well, how does this take shape and form in us who maybe don't have a disorder, but we're still struggling with this, right? So with that, this low sense of self, our self-perception does matter. All right. If we are dealing with a frequent self-doubt, right? Frequently looking at ourselves and saying, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm having those problems. Again, that criticism. When we're looking at ourselves and saying, I don't have as much favor as the next person. There's that uncertainty, and with that, right, because I have all those things, it causes me to make decisions that are going to affect my relationship with God, my relationship with other people. I'm going to make those decisions in order to flow my life the way it needs to, so that I can silence this perception of self. Now, what's interesting here, and I think this is important for you young people who are in the audience, okay, is that a little of this is normal at the young age, okay, at the 20s, in the late teens, and you're still trying to figure out where you fit in this world, okay? You're still, so there's an idea of I'm not as great as the other person over there, because you're not. You're 20 and you haven't done anything yet, okay? It's okay. It's okay. The reality is, and this is the thing, the reality is you will get there as you work on it. That's right. Okay? You will get there as you work on it. And this is the problem. It's plagued our younger generation. Okay, our younger generation is more anxious and more depressed than anything, and we have not told them that. Yeah, you're right. You're terrible, but you'll get there. Okay, we haven't actually communicated to them the process by which you get through life and get there. I remember. Okay, I was in there. Right, I was mid-20s, thinking I should know it all. I should be able to do it all. And I had to have somebody sit me down and say, Justin, you're like right here, and there's a whole mountain to climb, and you have like 80 steps to get up to the top of the mountain. And it's like just be okay with the process, okay? But with that, okay, with being able to do that, right, you have to be able to, again, cope and manage. You make decisions now that are going to affect the way you process that anxiety in relationships. So, and depression. And so to young people, don't be discouraged, okay? Just know there's hope, all right? You're gonna get there. But with that, you're going to make decisions in your relationships, all right? If you're dealing with a low sense of self. So this is young to old, everybody, all right? We make decisions in our relationships and what we do in order to try and soothe this. And sometimes if we're doing this unhealthily, we'll say, we can strive for really unhealthy relationships because we think they're going to soothe that voice. All right, and so we look to our relationship as our validator, right? Well, I'm with this person. This person's great, so obviously I'm great by comparison, right? I'm great by proxy. If we do that, then that means that when other people criticize us or say something, being very sensitive to that. I mean, we talked about that from Proverbs, right? Be the wise person who loves the person who criticizes you, right? That's our solution to that. But that's what we end up doing is, we can tear apart our relationships because, hey, I don't like it when you criticize me because I can't handle it. Well, the reality is you need the criticism, right? You need the criticism to be able to improve, and yet we throw it out. We throw out the baby with the bathwater because I can't handle the discomfort of being criticized. We do this when we talk about our boundaries, okay? And this is particularly for women, okay? Is that you will forego really important boundaries in order to be accepted in a relationship that you should not be in, okay? You should not be in, but you think you should because it says something about you, okay? That's a really important one, and women fall prey to this most easily, is that you will, and men too, but again, it's just this idea that somehow, some shape or form, I perceive this person as better. I perceive that I'm better because of this, but this person is calling me out to do things that, maybe I know I shouldn't, maybe aren't healthy, maybe aren't good, but I got to keep this person. Otherwise, then my whole view of self is going to be ruined. And so we have to, we will let things slide that we shouldn't. And then with that, because we are afraid of disappointment, we get into this people-pleasing mode. Anything I do will be about how is that perceived by the other person? Are they going to praise me for it? Are they going to hold on to me? Are they going to keep me around because I've done this? And again, this is where it's really dangerous in relationships. It's how we get to things like abusive relationships, because not all people are good. Surprise. Right? Not all people are good, and there are people out there that are looking for the person that they can manipulate, right? You got narcissists out there. They want people that are just going to lift them up. A narcissist will prey on someone with low self-view who's struggling with this, who wants to do anything to be kept in this relationship. It's a really horrible dichotomy, right? It's really, they just feed off each other. And so it's like those kinds of things you got to be very careful about. But the other thing is that this is really important, is that this is where we get things that will belief structures, right? This is where belief structures also are a problem. You look at people, they were raised in the church. They know the truth. How on earth do they believe that, right? How on earth do they fall away to go to another church or another thing? We look at our, people who are like, how on earth do you fall prey to something like transgenderism? How do they fall prey to that? It's because that is preying on kids. It's preying on people who are struggling with a low sense of view. And they're promising that this is a place of acceptance. Yeah. They're promising that this will solve that problem. They're promising some really rash promises, but it's being eaten up because anything is better than dealing with the anxiety and the depression of myself, right? Anything is better than that. I will accept this because it's promising to silence that. If I fall in line with this, then I have a place where I'm accepted. I fall in line with this. I have a place where I am good enough. I have a place where, again, we're all family in that sense. And so some really radical, horrible ideologies will prey on that. But I want to stop a second. I want to tell you how important this is to us as a church, okay? And thinking about our own right now. And when we have young people, we have our youth groups, we have all of the kids that are running around, like, we have to be able to communicate to them how to get past this low view of self, which is a normal phase of life. All right. Now, how many of you have kids, have teenagers, have raised teenagers, and they're all going through that that depression, that anxiety, they can't really handle it. Is that, I mean, you've seen that. And here's a weird other part of this that's normal, is that they don't want to listen to their parents. I don't know why, right? Like, wouldn't you think that they'd have some respect for parents? No, it's for whatever reason, right? It seems like there's just the stage of life where kids decide, my parents are idiots, and I'm not going to listen to a thing they say, and no matter what they say, I will reject it because they said it. And yet, Bob down the road might say the exact same thing, but because Bob's cool, I'm gonna listen to Bob, right? Like, they just have that idea around that. And so here's the thing, here's the ticket, okay, for us as a church and why this is important. Because you may not be what your kids want to hear, but you are absolutely what other parents want their, want to, or other other parents' kids want to hear, right? Other kids' parents might still look at you and be like, wow, you're cool, you're doing all this or whatever. And so it's important for us as a community to be able to structure around that you're speaking to other people's kids in those times and being for them and engaging with them through this process, because you might actually be able to say the thing that their parents have been saying and beating their head against the wall trying to say, but you might say it once and they'll accept it, all right? And so it's like that's such an important part of that, about how we cultivate, because it is really dangerous if we leave them to ideologies that absolutely are looking to prey on them while they're dealing with this. Okay, so that was a whole rabbit trail. We're going to come right back here, okay? So, all right, and so when it comes back to behavior in ourselves, as we're seeing this in low sense of self, okay, we see, again, emotional patterns that are born out of this, emotional patterns of embarrassment. They're dealing with, there's a discouragement over setbacks. There's just this persistent insecurity. It's just a reality that as we are struggling with it, those things come out. Our social behaviors, we avoid people. We want to avoid places with people. We have difficulty disagreeing. I mean, again, have we seen that in our culture? We just have a difficulty disagreeing. Well, it's born out of this idea that, I can't interact with you in disagreement. I'm either right and you need to agree with me, or I just don't even want to have that conversation altogether. And it's born into some really bad places when we do that. But it leads to avoidance of conflict, and avoidance, again, just like behavioral, right? Just like the idea that we're procrastinators, right? Avoidance in our conflict in our relationships, the same thing. I don't want to deal with the stress of the struggle of it. All right, and so that's important to, again, be able to figure out and deal with. Okay, so what then does the Bible tell us about this? Okay, so how do we do this? So Colossians 2:8, right, says, "See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ." All right, so this is where I says, like, this is where you're vulnerable to philosophies of the world, and we've got to be able to stand up and say, all right, I need to know what I know, and I need to know how I know it, so that something else can't come in and tell me differently. Right? That has to be something that we own ourselves. And as much as I love you and I want to help you through your low your low sense of self, like, this is something that you need to be able to carry on and say, hey, I know what I believe. I know why I believe it. And it's interesting that when we get through you guys have walked in faith. You guys know what it's like to put your faith to the test and to figure it out. Yeah. It breeds confidence, doesn't it? It breeds the ability, like, hey, I have figured this out. I have worked through this. I now am much more solid in what I believe than not. I hope in the next 20 to 30 years that my faith will look very different than today. It should. And if it's not, there's a problem. But that's a constant thing, and that should lead us to a place of confidence where we're doing things. It rids ourselves of self-doubt. It rids ourselves of the questioning, because I know how to defend myself. I know how to put myself to the test and come out unscathed, all right? There's just, and again, it puts us past this idea of I'm going to fail things. It puts us past that notion to be able to say, no, I know what success looks like. I know what it is to be right and do what God's calling out. There really is no substitute for strength and courage. Joshua 1:9, right? Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So, right, there's two commands there, right? Be strong and courageous, but also do not be feared or dismayed.
Yeah.
Do not be depressed and anxious, okay? Do not be those things. It's like, well, thanks God for telling me not to be the thing that I am. Like, how am I supposed to work with that? But it is the idea that there's just no substitute. You have to be able to set yourself up and say, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to be courageous, and I'm not going to let fear and anxiety rule. I'm not going to let that in. I'm not going to let that take control. And that's, the reality is like, and here's the thing, like we talked yesterday about how humility is the solution to the high view, right? Humility is that solution. And the reality with someone who's depressed and anxious is that we can't give them that same solution. We can't give them that same solution that says, yeah, humble yourself. I mean, they need humility, right? When we bounce back to the perspective, but they need to be able to say, I can do this, right? I can take this on. That has to be the thing that gets them through the voices that say you're not good enough and that you're not capable. And you understand, like, you have to be able to learn how to talk back to those voices and say, you're wrong, I can do this. You're wrong, I know how to be strong. You're wrong, I have somebody with me that's going to make it okay, right? That has to be the way we communicate to that. We have a whole generation, particularly, but we have a lot of people who are having a problem with depression and anxiety, particularly, and they are helpless to speak back to that voice. Because, hey, I must be terrible. My voice inside my head says I'm terrible. Well, then I'm terrible. And I'm just helpless to be able to communicate to that, right? And apparently the voice in your head has all the authority over who you are because it's in there, right? And it probably sees better than I do. And it's just, that's not the reality of what we sit with. And God's basically giving us the key is you have control over what your brain tells you. Did anybody hear that before?
Amen.
You have control over what your brain tells you, and your brain tells you things that are wrong. Have you ever had that thought where you're just like, whoa, that was wrong? Have you ever had that shake where did that thought come from? Yeah. You have the power to say, hey, brain, you're wrong, and we're going to think about this, and I'm going to come up with a better conclusion.
Amen.
That's where taking our thoughts captive to Christ comes from. And again, we have a whole view, and that somehow I'm helpless and powerless to that voice, and God gives it right here. No, be strong, be courageous, shut down that depression, shut down that fear. Don't give into it. All right. So then, with that, we see in Philippians 2:12 it says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." Okay, well, didn't I just tell you not to be feared and not to be anxious? Didn't I just say that? Well, that's the reality, is that we have to be able to walk through that. Okay, when we talk about the whole idea of dealing with anxiety and dealing with depression and dealing with this low sense of self, there's an idea of avoidance. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to find any way in which I can substitute that feeling for the right feeling, right? Like, again, we get back to like narcissism, right? I don't want to feel like I'm lower than, so I'm going to make this whole world where I'm awesome and you're all going to agree, and anyone who tries to hit me with reality is going to be immediately cast out because we don't want to feel that. Well, Paul's saying something different here. He's saying, work it out with fear and trembling. That means you need to walk through the anxiety. You need to walk through the fear, the depression, the things that are there. You need to walk through it and work out what's going on there.
Yeah.
Okay? When we talk about anxiety, particularly, I'm short on time, but we'll get through this. Okay. When we talk about anxiety, does anybody know what the function of anxiety is in your life? Because it's a normal thing. You're supposed to have it. Anybody know what the function is?
Warning.
It's a warning, right? Think of it like a smoke detector. All right? If it's beeping and your house isn't on fire, then you have a broken smoke detector. All right? If it's beeping and there's a blaze in the kitchen, well, then we got to deal with the blaze that's in the kitchen. All right? And so if we can look at anxiety as that tool that says, okay, is there something real going on? Is there a real danger here? and I can walk through that, and I can go up to the smoke detector and say, hey, are you telling me accurate information? Are you telling me what's right? Can I, what do I need to do, and how do I react to that? And I can engage that process without crumbling and being incapable of movement and incapable of actually functioning in the situation, right? That's working through the anxiety, because we can test it. We can deal with it, right? Test the spirits. We can deal with it and say, okay, yeah, you're giving me some pretty good information. I probably shouldn't walk down the dark alley where I was bugged last week. That's probably a good signal, right? Versus I'm in my house and I'm safe and it's sunny and my doors are locked and I live in a safe neighborhood. I'm probably safe, and that anxiety is way off target, right? And we can throw that information out as bad. Depression, the same thing. Depression, right? A sadness of dealing with something that is grievous, right? Is there depressions? Is there sadness that is warranted and merited? I can be sad at my spiritual state if I realize I'm not in Christ. And without Christ, I can be really sad about that, and that's appropriate. Hey, I am dealing with a sin problem, and I am doing things I know are wrong, and I'm sad about that. I can appropriately be sad about that. And with that, I can then make the appropriate decisions to correct said sadness, right? And that brings me through the process of Christ. That brings me through the process where I need to be, and alleviates that. If I get depressed so much so that I can't get out of bed in the morning, and I lose functioning, then we haven't worked out our salvation, right? Now let's also take that to a non-spiritual element for just a second, because I've heard this one recently, and it's quite important. I'm really sad that my apartment is all gross and disgusting, and I don't have any motivation to get up and move and clean my room. I can't do any of it. I can't function at all. Again, if we just lay there and let our apartment be just gross and disgusting, we're going to remain in sadness, and that depression is going to get worse. But if we make the decision to get up and clean things, guess what happens? That alleviates the sadness. The sadness is appropriate. I live in a pigsty. It's appropriate to say, I don't want to live in a pigsty. I want to do something about it. It's the decision to move, right? It's the decision to make a different choice than what you've been making. And that's the reality of living in that kind of thing and living in that instance. Again, I'll go back to, there are some major depressions that might need you to be shocked, with electroshock therapy. It's possible, okay? I'll put it out there. But there is the reality that if you make decisions, you can make decisions that alleviate your depression and anxiety, or you can make decisions that make it worse, right? I'm depressed. I'm going to use substances to not deal with that depression. I'm going to make it worse. It's going to be awful. It's going to make it a lot harder to get out of it. But if I'm going to say, man, I'm in a depressed state, and I might figure out why I'm sad, but you know what? I want to go out and I'm going to serve someone. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the things I know I need to do. I'm going to go to church on Sunday. I'm going to interact. I'm going to tell someone I'm sad. I'm going to try and figure out why. Those are things that may not make depression disappear, but they certainly make it more manageable. And that's the thing about this, is God says, make the unspeakable things speakable. Right? We live with this shame and doubt and fear over the things that we perceive as ourselves, and we think it's ugly, and we hold it inside, and we isolate from other people. And God says, no, I want you to shine a light on that. I want you to put that out there, even if just for yourself, to engage with it and make it better. And it will make it better. It will alleviate it. Okay. So tomorrow, I want to leave time for questions, but tomorrow we're going to talk about how all of this comes together in Christ and His example. But I want to leave time for any questions on that. I know you guys were very patient with me. Any questions or comments to this, to the low view of self? No. Yes, sir.
What was that scripture? Make unspeakable things speakable. I don't recognize that.
That was I didn't put that out there. It's more of a concept. There's not scripture to back that up. It's kind of more. Yeah, it's more of a thought process. There's no scripture. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the thing I find hard to do with some people is they will say, I have this problem and I can't change it.
Sure.
And how do I convince them to at least try to change it. To believe, hey, if I do something like you were just saying there,
Mm-hmm.
that this could possibly change. That this is not something that's a foundation in me that can't be changed.
Sure. I mean, reality with that is that you're the cheerleader there, right? And the cheerleaders don't win the game. They're they're there to help improve morale and that. And so, speaking to them that says, "Hey, it's possible. Hey, movement is possible. Dealing with it is possible." And being a cheerleader coach to that is probably as much as you can do for someone who does not want to make the decision themselves. I mean, that's a very important thing I think with counseling people is you can't do 51% of the work. And so it's like you can only show that there are options, that there's ways through, that there is a possibility. And that's really what hope brings. Hey, right? There's a possibility. There's a way through. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Does that answer kind of? Yeah. Okay. You and then you.
I'm just going to address that as someone who has suffered from major depression for most of her life.
Sure.
Sometimes the idea of doing something different is terrifying because you've lived with this thing for so long that it's kind of your companion.
Yeah.
And it's a fearful thing to change anything.
Yeah.
And it becomes part of your identity. And that's a whole different thing to unravel before you can even address the depression is unraveling how it's not who you are, it's a thing you have.
Yeah.
And so there are like two different processes to get to where you can help somebody.
Definitely. And I would say that's one reason why I have a problem with DSM and diagnosing is like we make it your identity that you are this thing instead of this is a function of you and we need to learn how to work with that function for sure. Yes, sir.
The scriptures are comforting because they say with God all things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that's part of the cheering that you were saying.
Yeah. And how can we say all things are possible except major depressive disorder? Like how can we say that and mean it if we treat it as such for sure?
We can encourage them to believe that all things are possible with God.
Yeah, exactly. True.
I think another addition on with the what if it feels like you can't do anything about it is that sometimes there is a reality too that something going on physically with our bodies can affect our mental state. And I've been in situations where I really felt like I couldn't get a move into something and then realized I had not eaten a vegetable in 3 days. And I had been outside.
I feel you. Okay.
Like sometimes you need some vitamin D and some caffeine.
Yeah.
Yes.
And things like that. Like you don't realize that maybe you can't do anything about it until you fix something else that's wrong.
Yeah, and I to say to that is that again you kind of go back to where I was saying is like at mid-20s I'm thinking I should be at the top of the mountain, and I'm here at the bottom thinking I need to get there. It's like it's a step process, do something different than you did before and see what you get. Like the idea is move something, change something. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't a good approach to working with someone that is bringing a problem to you be being able to relate to them, to tell them what you're hearing them saying about themselves, about their problem, so that you can understand what it is? And don't respond to a person's argument until you can repeat it to them in words that are acceptable to them. Then they know you're listening.
Definitely.
Once you've got them, once they know you're listening, then you can ask them, what have you already done to alleviate this? If they say nothing, then you ask, what are you open to options?
Yeah.
You haven't given them any solutions yet, but you are letting them know that you're listening to them and they're willing to open up to you more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's such a powerful thing. Just to make sure the other person feels heard in your conversation before we start saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, and offering all the solutions. That's where we can be of value to people for sure. Yes.
When I was young, my daddy had a phrase when one of us would say, I can't. My daddy would say, can't do anything but wet the bed. And the value to that in the last 60 or 70 years has been, I can. There are things that I can do.
Right.
In spite of mind-blocking things, there are things that I can do. And that has helped me.
Yeah.
I don't went to bed at all anymore.
I'm not going to ask when that stops, but okay. No, absolutely. That is just being able to speak differently to this mode of thinking, right? That's the whole idea. Is how are you changing the conversation going on in your head, and being that for someone like, hey, this is how I have that. It's having the idea of like normalizing what they're going through. That's another thing that was an important thought earlier. Is when I say that depression and anxiety are normal things of life, we all experience it to some degree or another. When we see people who are trapped by this depression and this anxiety, it speaks volumes to say, you know what, I went through something just like that, and this is what I did. This is how I fixed it, and that you're not alone in doing that. It's such a powerful thing to be able to normalize, like, what you're going through is not ridiculously out there. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you were talking about how your actions can help get you out of anxiety and depression because those things are, helping cause it, like your dirty house, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many times where you're there and you finally get the motivation. And you're like, things have to change, and I'm just at the bottom, and you just get that motivation to get there. But then you keep going back into it. I think and I'm kind of asking more, but like when you keep going back into it, then that's the issue of your mindset can actually change. Your motivation might have changed because you knew practically that would have helped, but that was more just like a boost that you needed, and you needed that boost, but you didn't actually fix the problem.
You didn't, and I'm with you there. That the problem is not solved when you make those simple changes. But what I will say is that when you strive for those consistent behaviors and you strive to do that, it alleviates it. Okay, so it's easier to look at your messy house and say, all right, if I can't do anything today, I will take out the trash. Okay, and maybe I didn't solve the whole problem, but I'm going to take out the trash, and I can look at the trash can and know that it was taken out by me. I did that. Is easier on your depression and your anxiety over it than, I'm just going to chuck another bag on the counter because I got nowhere else to put it, right? Like there is a difference in the way you handle it, and it alleviates. And over time, I think that brings it to a place where this becomes manageable, not fixed, not solved, because we're all dealing with it, but manageable in the sense that, okay, I know how to walk through this with fear and trembling, right? Work out your salvation. I can walk through this. I can do this piece by piece. I can figure out what's going on here. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Last thoughts? I didn't miss anybody. If you want any more, I'd love to talk to you after class if you have any other thoughts on that, because you guys have been giving me some great feedback. So anyway, I thank you very much for being here, for all your comments, for your attention. So we'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow in Christ, this is how this is fixed.